Hi everyone, before you dive into the episode, I just wanted to interrupt really quickly. You're gonna dive into this episode and you're gonna hear me call this podcast the Holistic Hustle Podcast. And that is because it used to be the old name of this podcast. And it was an amazing ride. I'm so grateful for the Holistic Hustle Podcast and what it served. But recently I've decided to rebrand the podcast based off the evolution of my own journey, my own story, and where God is calling me to go next. And so now the rebrand, which you may know already, is called Wisdom is Wealth. Didn't want you to be confused, so dive into this episode. They were an amazing episode, amazing guests, amazing insights, and enjoy.
So it was almost this slap in the face that I was like, if no one speaks up, I need to step up into this leadership role. And so here we are again, where I'm faced with the truth of, if you don't do it, maybe nobody will.
Hi, I'm Justin Buonamo, and this is Holistic Hustle. Holistic Hustle is doing things for the right reasons, working hard for the right reasons. The healthy balance of what work and progression and accomplishment and success should actually look like. Welcome back to another episode of the Holistic Hustle Podcast with Justin Buonamo. I have a very special guest here with me today. I call her JB number 2. I should probably call her number 1. She's the more important JB. Jess Burgio, who's a very good friend of mine and just a brilliant mind holistically. Jess Burgio is a holistic life and business coach, and her passion is helping women find clarity to activate new levels of confidence so that they start taking action to pursue their big dreams and goals. Former salon owner and beauty entrepreneur of 22 years, she is the founder of the Unscripted Mastermind and host of her own highly rated podcast show, Unscripted. Her expertise as a holistic life and business strategist has helped her create her transformational PWR breathwork. She also identifies as an author, podcast mentor, speaker, and mama who's obsessed with helping entrepreneurs gain the skills they need to powerfully connect their voice to their brand in order to grow their business. Jess is the go-to for all things support, systems, and strategy around helping you take inspired action on your big dreams and goals. And I can really relate to that last message because a big part of my podcast existing was when I was on Jess's a year or so ago, and she really did inspire me with the way she handled her business and went about the podcasting side of things, and also breathed a little life and inspiration into me just within the interactions that we had on her podcast. And then I started to get to know her a little bit more. I'm like, wait, she does this in a lot of areas of her life, a lot of important areas of her life. She gets her shit done. Right. So when it comes to the professional and accolades and accomplishment side of things, but does it for the right reasons. And then also is just on track when it comes to taking care of her wellness, right, her internal world and her relationships. And so basically a perfect guest for the Holistic Hustle Podcast. So Jess Burgio, welcome to the show. We're excited to have you.
Oh, I love it when I fit in the perfect category. What up, JB? my number 2 in command. I love that you have taken action, that you started this podcast. And I love that I get to be just a tiny piece of your story of, being inspired to get your voice out there and create some action around your personal brand, because people need to know more of who you are too.
Well, thank you for that. Thank you for that. And this has been so fun. And when I can bring people on that, have very similar outlooks on life as me, but like not to a toxic level, but because they're also unique in many of their own ways too as well. And I think a big part of what makes you unique is your story. And I've heard bits and pieces of it, but I'd love to hear how you got into the entrepreneurial space and how you made your way to the coaching and podcasting side of things.
Amazing. So I've been an entrepreneur pretty much my whole adult life. I got into beauty school my junior year of high school. One of my friends suggested we go to beauty school. And I said, what the heck? I don't know what else to do. And so having 2 parents who were both entrepreneurs, I wasn't really thinking like I'm going to go be an entrepreneur. I thought, go do something creative and fun. Hairdressing gave you a lot of freedom. I knew some people who were in the business who loved to create their own schedule and just had a lot of flexibility and freedom. And that's really what I was after, because my mom and my stepdad worked 24/7, weekends all the time. And I thought if I could control my schedule, I'll probably have better luck at like being around for my kids in the future. I at least had that forethought of like, I want a schedule that I can somewhat control versus being told where to be and what to do. I knew I was a hard worker, so it wasn't about like having to create that work ethic. Again, watching your parents work 24/7, like you build up a sense of you just work, and it's not good or bad, but it's if you do what needs to get done in order to provide for your family, in order to make sure everybody's good. in order to have a business. And so when I started doing hair, it was a really creative, fun outlet that I knew the harder I worked or the more I put into it, the more results I would see. And so when you're working in a client-based business, it's really all about you. You're the client experience. And I could tell by how I showed up, the results that I would get in the form of clients being excited to come back, wanting to tip me, not batting an eye at my prices when I would raise my prices. I learned how to kind of be a really high level entrepreneur and give a great client experience, which has then transformed 22 years later as a really powerful skill set that I have now with the clients I work with now. Everyone's not just a number to me. And I do something even more personal, though I think hair and makeup is pretty personal. It's the external version of, helping people with their confidence, feeling good on the outside. But what I noticed over the years when women would sit down and look in the mirror, sit in my chair is, one, they were very candidly sharing how they felt about themselves. There was always a negative comment coming out of somebody's mouth, no matter how beautiful I thought they looked before and after the service. And it just led me to think there could be a bigger impact I could make in my future once I kind of wrap my head around how I could help on a deeper level, on a larger scale, right? Because at that time it was one-to-one service. I can only do one person at a time. And, COVID gifted me with space and time, and it pushed me to realize I was just creating excuses out of fear to step into something I'd never done before. Because after 20 years, I was very confident in what I did. Nobody could come in my chair that made me feel like I couldn't do the job or do a good job, So deciding to go after a different arena was really, I had no expectation of what would happen. I did not account for them being a beginner again. I definitely did not think I'd have to kind of start at ground zero. And so that held me back in a lot of ways because I was so worried what everybody else would think. Oh, she's not successful. She can't have another business. Just go back to what that you've done so well. And, had I not changed anything, all of my clients would have been happy. I had over 200 clients, a great book of business. And everybody was like, oh, that's cute. You have this podcast, but you're still going to do my hair, right? And, I joke about it now, but I did have a lot of support from my clients because many of them had been with me 10, 15, 20 years. And they could see that, I could offer more. That was one of the reasons they'd love to come and see me. And I would joke sometimes, I'm not the world's greatest hairdresser, but you're definitely going to feel better about yourself when you leave my chair. And that is like my passion, is leaving people better than I find them and helping in any sort of way that I can. And so that's kind of how I coined my term, which is holistic life and business strategist, because, often my clients would leave with some sort of implementation plan, whether it was to start eating healthier because they were sharing some ailment with me. Oh, my hair's thinning, my scalp's itchy, I'm not sleeping well, my eyes twitching. It's like all of these things. I started to develop like a skill of, I grew up in a very healthy family, healthy environment. So I could pass those on to people. And I realized that was a skill set that people would pay you for. And so it's interesting. A lot of times we know things and we don't know how they can serve other people or how we would ever make a business out of it. But, 25 years ago when I went to beauty school, that wasn't looked at as a very, lucrative type of career. People weren't like, oh, good for you. You're going to be a hairdresser. They're like, cool. What are you going to do after that when you get a real job? And then 25 years later, I'm like, I'm a podcaster. And people were like, oh, that's cute. Is that a job? Can you make money doing that? So I've always kind of pushed against the grain, and it's really always just served me, because what it does for people who do go against the grain is allows for you to create your own lane. And there are so many people who want to be creative and want to do things their own way. And there's room for all of those people now. Just like back in the day, there was room for so many hairdressers. No one said, oh, you shouldn't be a hairdresser because there's so many of them. But now I see people holding themselves back as far as like stepping into the coaching space or becoming a podcaster. Like, oh, isn't that saturated already? I'm like, there's 7 billion people in the world.
Right.
Like, what does that even mean, saturated?
Right.
So, when I finally joined a business mastermind, about 6 years ago, it was because I wanted to learn about growing an online business. I didn't have one yet, but I had an idea that I wanted to somehow diversify myself, and I had no idea what that was going to look like. And I found mentors who I saw doing something that I kind of felt like I wanted to do, living a life that I felt like I could aspire to be like. And that was Chris and Lori Harder. I will forever and always give them mad credit for just being a great mirror for what was possible.
Yeah.
And so that first investment was the biggest investment I ever made in myself, with not knowing a clear ROI. I was like, I have no idea what I'm going to get out of this. I have no business And I hope I walk out of here with a couple high level friends who can help me figure this out. And so here we are 5 years later. I have a pretty thriving podcast that I started because COVID gifted me time when my salon was closed. And I just went all in. I went all in just creating the brand that you see now that I have. And it's had many different iterations over the last 5 years as I've figured out who I am and how I want to show up and who my ideal clients are, and really what my strengths are, because we can provide some solutions to people in one certain way, but often we don't see our own gifts until you start sharing yourself on social media or through a podcast.
Mm. I love that. I appreciate you sharing that. I thought it was particularly cool that I didn't know both of your parents are entrepreneurs. And I also love when I hear that you come from like a healthy family. Like my parents actually taught me like about supplementation and eating and exercising. And so that's a really cool part of your story I did not know. Um, and I think the biggest part is just you did not let good be the enemy of great, and you did not let comfort hold you back from what was possible. Because I know a lot of people who have like a good situation, right? I could relate to that before I left my day job. I had a really good day job at Johns Hopkins. And I was like, do I really want to leave? Do I really want to give up this salary? Do I want to give up this safety, right? All the excuses in the world, right? And very similar to you, COVID blessed me with time. Like working in the hospital on the business side of things, they wanted as little people in the hospital as possible, right? And so like the admin, the leadership team, they were like, just work from home. And I utilized a ton of that time to learn how to go into an online business. And so I love your story because I think there's so many people out there that are just like, I've got this good situation, or I'm really comfortable, but at the same time, I'm being called to something greater, and they never get around to answering that greater calling because they just stay stuck in the good. They stay stuck in the comfortable, right? But sometimes God, when you won't close a door for yourself, he'll slam it in your face. And it sounds like COVID, did that for you. And so was podcasting the first step in the business, like building? Was that like the first thing you did when you went out on your own or were starting to go out on your own?
Technically, no. So when I was stepping away from hair, the sequence of events was going into that mastermind while I still had a thriving business at the salon. I had not yet opened my own salon space yet, so I was still working for somebody else. So in those 6 months of being a part of that mastermind, I started my networking events for hairdressers. I opened the salon. My dream space kind of fell in my lap via one of my longtime clients, and I just felt more equipped to be a founder, be an owner, be a leader versus just being one of the pack. And I very much liked being one of the pack. I am very peer to peer. I'm a 2 on the Enneagram, which is like a supportive helper. So I love that support role. I don't necessarily would choose the leadership role, but I have leadership skills that if no one else speaks up, like I'm always the first I'll take over, I'll take action. Like you want me there if something happens, crisis situation, Jess goes into action. And I feel like I had to stop fighting the fear of what it would feel like to be on the leadership side and really allow myself to step into that role by opening my own salon. So again, in those 6 months, started those networking events with people loved. I hosted several of those, and they were the first time I think a lot of people in my community got to go to something that wasn't based on a class. And it was all different stylists and beauty artists from around town coming together just to network. And, what I learned in that mastermind, especially the in-person portions of like collaborating with people outside of your industry, I wanted to bring that back into, my industry, an industry I love very much that raised me basically and allowed for me to find who I was over those 20 years. You really can be anybody you want in this creative space. And so by bringing them together, you wouldn't know what Sally down at the other salon's doing or how Susie's growing her Instagram, across town. But together we could talk about ways to collaborate and grow. And, when I started out, that wasn't how it was. You didn't share formulas. You didn't show stuff on Instagram. Right. You didn't share anything. Everyone was fearful that you'd steal my client. And now we're not in that era anymore. Now everything is like, you can watch hours of hair videos and learn all of the stuff for free, which I love. I always say, like, give your best stuff away for free and people will, flock to you. That's how we give value. But it was finally having that space after 15 years of wanting my own space, having the guts to finally do it, that 6 months later, after the doors opened, we were shut down. And I had this beautiful space and nobody was in it. And so luckily through that time, I met somebody who needed a haircut. He also happened to be a videographer, photographer. And I said, I really want to start this podcast. I've had a microphone for about 2 years. I've just been scared. I don't know if I have enough content. I don't know if people want to hear from me. I hate my voice, all of the fear-based thoughts, right? And he said, well, let's just start recording lives here and we'll get people in here and I'll help you. He didn't really know what he was doing either. So it was like the blind leading the blind. And I realized quickly that audio does not equate to being good at, or video doesn't equate to being good at audio. So we did everything backwards, sideways, and it was whatever. But at the end of the day, we started messy. And every single Monday I would hustle up some of my friends. I'm like, hey, I know you got nothing going on today. Come down to the salon. Let's podcast. And so we would sit and I would do 4 back-to-back episodes every single Monday. And I just started picking people's brains of like, how you doing right now? I just really wanted to give a voice to the industry. So it came from a pain point. And often that's when we'll take action, like you say about those doors being slammed. And the pain point, hearing that we were allowed to work outside versus working inside in a safe, clean environment. We go to school to learn sanitation as a hairdresser. Like that is one of the key main things. We learn that more than we learn how to cut a straight line or to highlight hair. Yeah. So it's pretty, we have testing and certifications, like it is a big deal. So it was almost this slap in the face that I was like, if no one speaks up, I need to step up into this leadership role. And so here we are again, where I'm faced with the truth of, if you don't do it, maybe nobody will. And so it was cool. And then after those surface level questions of like, how you doing, how you surviving through this, I was like, how did you become successful? And I realized that my interview skills behind the chair with my clients, getting to the root of like, Susie, why do you really want to cut your bangs today? What's happening? We go a level deeper when she starts crying, telling me her boyfriend broke up with her and that's why she wants to cut bangs today. And I'm like, that's not what's happening. So, really getting curious. I call myself nosy, but curious, I think feels like a better word.
I like it.
Yeah. Getting curious about how did someone else find levels of success? Very much like this podcast, right? And so I honed in on my interview skills. I got clear. I practiced. I sucked in the beginning. I stumbled over my words and, I didn't know how to lead a good interview, but eventually I did. And I studied my own tape and I watched the podcast back and I picked it apart just like you would, if you're watching back your tape, if you play sports. And I just really committed to the fact that I was going to get really good and comfortable at this. And I kind of ran through my warm network of people in person. And of course, that cost me an arm and a leg to do it in person. And we started going virtual with all my friends who weren't in town. And that mastermind had kind of set my networking on fire as far as like getting me around other entrepreneurs in different fields. And so it was like, connect me to that person, connect me to the next person. And so selfishly, this podcast that I have grew my personal network 100x over the last 3 years that I've had the show. And that's the biggest reason why, one, I keep it going, because we have to, I think, really always do things that are going to bring us the most joy. And then if they have a ripple effect in the world, that's obviously awesome as well. But being able to provide like value and teaching people something through them getting to go for a walk or listen to you in the car, like completely free to listen to this podcast, is something I felt like a really good way to create visibility. But the first thing I ever created during that time were those networking events. And then I started coaching to hairdressers around how to create a 6-figure mindset to grow your business to levels of wealth, because a lot of hairdressers still played in that area of, I just get by, I just make just enough to pay the bills. They didn't really know how to take a handle on their money and get really financially like set up to win, which is why I vie with you and the work that you do, because to me, it's so important. And I realized in having those conversations and coaching people around that a lot of people were stuck on the mindset that 6 figures meant $100,000. And a lot of people would come to me and say, I already make 6 figures. And I'd think, you make $100,000 or you make $999,000? Like there's still 6 digits in those numbers. Where do you fall? And everybody's mindset was 100,000. And I was like, oh my God, I have to change the game here. Like this is effed up. And, I created a course and a program that really could have been for anybody around building a 6-figure mindset. And so again, you kind of put out different iterations of how you can help people. And then people started coming around the back door of like, okay, I know you coach to this, but can you help me with this? I need leadership with my salon, or I need help over here. And one thing led to another. And, now I have a mastermind where I get to do high-level strategy and also space holding for, other entrepreneurial women who are looking to make multiple 6 figures.
I absolutely love that. I love that because there's many things, people that are listening, you can learn from Jess Burgio here. One of them, like I said before, like, don't let good be the enemy of great. Don't let comfort hold you back from answering that calling of like, there's something greater out there for me, right? Because if you feel that, then that's true. But what you just heard there was, Jess just puts one foot in front of the other, and then the next step reveals itself. It's like, I love the book, The Five Temptations of a CEO. It's an awesome book. If you ever read it, I'd read it. It's like maybe like 100 something pages. It's taught through a fable. And one of the temptations that the author teaches is bad CEOs, if you will, right? Ones that struggle. They operate off of certainty instead of clarity. Certainty being, I have to be certain that this next step that I'm going to take is going to work out 100%, that there's no risk, that there's going to be a return on investment, that no one's going to talk bad about me, and whatever other things that we say in our mind when we're trying to make certainty pop up, right? But as you can imagine, if you wait around for certainty, you're going to wait around for forever, right? You're going to miss a lot of incredible opportunities, especially in the business world. And so they say quality CEOs operate off of clarity. It's just clear this is the next best step, and I'm going to take it and trust the rest, right? And so a lot of times God, just in business or really in life, he wants us to take the step that feels uncomfortable, and he'll meet us there and then show us that next step, reveal that next step. But until you take that first step, until you go out and you're willing to suck at something at first, you're never going to get good at something, right? To become good at something, you must suck at it first, right? And so when things start to become expectations, they're no longer problems. And so if you've never climbed a tree before and I told you to go climb a tree right now, I bet you'd suck at it at first. But if it meant something to you, right, you felt like it was your calling, you're going to figure it out over time with reps. And that's a lot of anything in life, but particularly in the podcasting industry. And now you're on episode 309. And I know you help other people, right, with their podcast, amongst several other things that you do. So us being on a podcast here, I'd be curious. I'm personally curious here. What is a popular piece of advice in the podcasting industry that you don't necessarily agree with?
Oh, there's a lot.
I bet.
There's a lot because it's a creative space. So there's really no boundaries. There's no box. There's no wrong way, I don't think, to podcast. But I definitely think in the beginning, quality is important. People need to hear that you sound like a professional. As much as I want to tell people to start messy and to just like pick up their phone and start recording, if you want to be taken seriously, you wouldn't show up at a really nice restaurant in your sweatpants and just be like, well, I am rich. It doesn't matter. Nobody cares. If you're trying to make a good first impression, make a good first impression. It's not that much harder to get a decent microphone and to possibly get a ring light if you want to do video. And so, I do agree that starting is better than not starting. So wherever you're at, find yourself in that story. But if you are proactively trying to become more visible and to create some sort of presence and establish yourself as a thought leader or somebody of expertise, you want to show that. And it's just like I joked back in the days of hiring new assistants for my salon. If you show up and look like you don't belong here, meaning you don't have your hair and makeup done, you don't have a cute outfit on, you picked the wrong industry. This is the beauty industry. We are looked at as what's trending, what's the latest lipstick color, you know what I mean? And it is what it is. And there's a lot of other, jobs that you can have that don't require that. And it doesn't take a lot of money to look put together. It really doesn't. It doesn't take a lot of money to start a podcast. In fact, I have a resource that's how to start a podcast basically for free. And, I think at any other given time down the road, quantity is just as important as quality. Once you get your audio dialed in and once you're trying to, really push yourself out there, the quantity does matter as well. Some people want to err on the side of like, okay, one quality episode's better than a bunch. It depends on what your reason for having the show is. Is it about the numbers so you can convert brands to potentially like run ads on your show? Is it strictly for visibility for you to get more clients into your pipeline? Is it just to put yourself on the map of like, hey, look at me? But if you look at anyone who has a thriving podcast, they're driving traffic somewhere else. They're monetizing it on the back end, or they're literally creating a 6+ figure business with their podcast because there's so much traffic being driven to it. Another probably thing I'd say is that you don't need video. In this day and age, it would be silly not to record your video alongside your episode because people want to see your face. If you are developing a personal brand, which I think everybody should be, I mean, you are, whether you're the director of it or not. If you're posting anything on social media, if someone can Google your name, you have a personal brand. You're creating a reputation somehow. So you should be the driver in that seat, and you should be the one dictating what that looks like. So for me, it's making sure I have great lighting, putting on a cute outfit. I have a Target tank top on, and I put a little bit of makeup on, wash my hair. This is podcast day. I show up like it's a job so that it pays me like a job. It takes care of me, and it represents the version of me I want to show the world. So I think people can argue with that or not. Other than that, I really don't think there are any rules. in podcasting, which is one of the reasons why so many people are drawn to this type of creative, modality. It's fun. And I think I've seen people who get so stuck on what their cover art is, the name of their show, that they then don't start either. And the great thing is you can change the name of your show like I have. You can change your cover art. You can change your show description. You could swap out your original trailer for a new one. Again, it's really fun to just like start to talk and put things out there and then, create edits as you go. But the one thing that I do coach and teach to a lot when I do strategy for podcasters is, what is the reason you're starting the show? Let's reverse engineer what that can look like. So you're starting in the right arena, you're speaking to the right people, your show title equates to that, your SEO optimized as far as like the titles of your shows. So people are finding you for the things you want them to find you for. If you're always talking about workouts, but you don't sell workout plans, you sell like, I don't know, financial planning. You should probably figure out the content you want to be putting out there. It helps you create content with so much more ease.
Love that. And I think honestly, a big thing I held on to it is just like the outcome that you're looking for is dictated by the input that you're willing to give, right? Like 2 + 2 doesn't equal 6. So if you use a shit microphone and a shit camera and you're upset about the podcast not gaining traction, right? Or people listening to one episode and not returning, well, it's like, that's kind of the result that you could have expected. Again, it's not to say that you won't increase in quality, whether that be audio or visual over time, but there are a lot of resources out there when it comes to podcasting, but like you can literally access for free for like 5 tips on how to start off at least at decent quality, right? Where nobody's going to at least know that you're brand new unless you say it. Yeah. And so I love that. Like a lot of times people pray for the outcome, but they're not willing to put in the input for that outcome. And then they're confused on why the outcome doesn't look the way they want it.
And often the outcome we think we want is just a made up end result that you came up with. And if you walk the journey, you'll realize quickly that part of the outcome is the journey. It's like I said, when I talked about networking and getting to know people and building relationships, we want to skip to the part where we get to sit at that table with those big kids, those big people. But if you don't build relationships with them in the meantime, what are you going to have to say to them when you're sitting at the table? You know what I mean? You can't sit down next to somebody when you haven't done shit. You have to build up enough to where when you are invited to some of these rooms or you're put in situations like you say, I have 309 podcast episodes. Someone looks at me, they don't even care. No one ever asks me, how many downloads do you have? They say, how many episodes do you have? Because to them, that shows consistency. Yeah, no one ever asked me my downloads. It shows consistency. It shows that you're dedicated to something, and it shows that like you're someone who can be trusted. And in this day and age in the online space, that is like
huge.
Yeah, if my reputation has those 3 words in it, I'm good. Who cares what I do? I want people to be able to trust what I say and trust where I direct them to, because I'm a huge networker. I send people to people all the time. And I want people to know like the value that I'm trying to create comes from a really good place. It's not just about metrics and numbers and vanity things. And that's why I do spend time on social media marketing, because you don't want to be the best kept secret, right? If you're a podcaster, you want to market your stuff. You want to sell whatever it is you have because you're passionate that could help somebody. But it's helped me become a better salesperson. The podcast has helped me become a better marketer. I actually get excited to share my episodes because I have something that I made. And I don't know about anybody else listening. If you're a creator in any sort of way, when you make something, you feel really proud of it, even if it's just a silly reel on Instagram and it does well, you're like, yay. These quick hits of validation, whether they're big or small, are really the thing that's the journey. That's the opportunity for you to like sit in that growth. And really at the end of the day, you're like, who cares if anything comes of it? Like, I'm enjoying myself in the process. So if you steal that self from yourself now and you're only fixated on the end result, you're going to miss so many opportunities that might come out of whatever comes out of your mouth, or whatever opportunity you have to have a guest on to talk about something that you wouldn't normally ever have 30 minutes, 45 minutes to share with that person.
Yeah, I absolutely love that, because when you bring up like the 309 episodes, when you said that to me earlier, I was like, oh, whoa, she's been at this. That's why my next question was like, when did you start? Right. And just and that answer to that question too just adds up, is just to like you just going out there and doing it and getting it done, and getting really good at it over time. And I'm just so happy that you started that so people can experience you, because I truthfully believe it's not just because you're a guest and a friend, but like your ideals about life, the way like your mental frameworks, right? And your balance between like, I want to do this, because I have goals and I get shit done, but it also is something that's bringing me closer to God at the same time. It's also something that's authentic. It's also something that like has the right motives. Right. And I think sometimes people are just like, I'm going to go get shit done and just blend some motives, some good, some bad. Right. And then there's people like you that are just of highest of integrity that like you get your shit done. You are okay with being a person, of high success, but for the right reasons. And I love the quote that like, it is okay to be it is possible and okay to be an incredible human being who just happens to have very high profit margins in what they do. Right. And I feel like you're just a great example of that. And so on top of your podcast, I know you have your book. And so I saw this quote in the description of your book titled, Come As You Are, The Art of Unbecoming Who They Told You to Be, which I love that title. But the quote read, success, happiness, and fulfillment are like fingerprints unique to every one of us. Can you elaborate on this quote a little bit more and like what you would want it to mean for the audience? I know there's room for interpretation, but I know a lot of my quotes that are powerful. I'm like, I'm really hoping they take this away from it.
Read it one more time.
Sure. Success, happiness, and fulfillment are like fingerprints unique to every one of us.
I mean, I think it's very self-explanatory, obviously, but I'll explain the depths of it to me because, if we have any women listening, and I know a lot of men do this too, but that comparison will rob you of every single joy that you experience, even if you have extreme levels of success, monetary, financial gain. It won't matter if you're always looking at someone who's doing better than you, who's prettier than you, who's smarter than you, who has a prettier girlfriend or husband than you. You will never be satisfied with what you have if you're always looking elsewhere. And that doesn't fall in suit with having faith that you're where you're supposed to be and believing that God has created something for you and it's only for you. You're so unique that when we try to be like other people, it feels wrong. And we can aspire to be like other people. I think mirroring what success is for other people is a great framework to getting where you maybe want to go because you've never been there. And, say maybe Bob's been there, so you follow in Bob's footsteps, but you're probably not even going to have the same results as him. And that's why the online coaching space is tough for a lot of people because you see other people's successes and think, oh, that looks like what I should want. And, even opening the salon was a great example of what everybody wanted for me versus what I truly knew I wanted to do. And I did it because it was expected of me. It felt like the next right thing to do. I could now have this identity and this title of salon owner. People give you more street cred. I was older, it's like, what else are you going to do? Are you still just a quote unquote hairdresser? So even in the midst of those years, I was still comparing this version of me that I was worried people were going to judge me on. And so, I had somebody and a coach really look at like, what does success mean to you? And it goes back to how I coach a lot of my clients now, which is we dive into what are your personal values. I've even had therapists do the values work with me. And I think at the end of the day, if you are feeling lost, overwhelmed, confused, or unfulfilled, going back to what are my values and, am I living a life aligned with my values? And from that place, anything you create is going to have success, momentum, fulfillment wrapped around it. And if you make money in the interim with it, great. But we can make money literally doing anything, literally anything. They pay so well at In-N-Out and like all of these other places now. If you wanted just to get a paycheck, you could hustle and work 3 jobs like my mom did she had me at 18. Waitressing, odds and ends job, like we figured it out. Yeah. Did that have purpose and meaning? No. Did anyone teach her about values? Of like, you had a child, the value would be, do you want to raise your own child or do you want someone else to do it? And so I knew early on that I didn't want to be a mother that wasn't present for my son. And so choosing to be a hairdresser was because I wanted to be available. And no one else needed to know that reason. Anyone who was kind of putting down, oh, you're just going to be a hairdresser. I didn't care to explain myself. I knew that I could create a life that meant something to me that was going to have a ripple effect in my son's life. And so even now, he's home for the summer and I'm here. I'm at home available. If anything happens, he's almost a teenager now. So these are even more important years that I knew 5 years ago when I asked myself, life is really good right now. You're making great money. If nothing changes in the next 5 years, are you going to be okay with your life? And I said, I would be okay with it, but I don't think I'd be proud of myself. I don't think I would feel like I've done everything I was put here to do. And that's when that mastermind presented itself. And Chris Harder used a term that really like struck a chord with me. And he said, this is for my accidental entrepreneurs. And I was like, ooh, that's me. Like I never intended to be an entrepreneur. Like I'm a really good employee. Like I love checking lists. I love doing what I'm told. I love the accolades that come with like being a good employee, all that kind of stuff. Because again, in the beginning, I was an employee at a salon, right? But I quickly realized like that was me, and I never had any real framework or structure given to me on what makes a successful entrepreneur. So I had to figure it out over those years. And, I knew in that moment, if I didn't say yes to this next opportunity, I was going to feel behind. And I knew that these people were doing things that I really wanted to be doing. So if I didn't get myself in that room, I was going to have FOMO of like, you don't know what you don't know. You should go learn what you don't know. Cause I bet there's a lot of shit you don't know. And sure enough, it was like getting fire hosed, all this information that I couldn't apply yet, which caused a little bit of frustration. We could do a whole nother podcast episode on that. But ultimately what it did was grow my network and my belief that these were normal people too, just figuring it out also. And that their, driving factors, their values, their missions in life were different than mine, but also similar of like wanting to create good in the world, wanting to have a life of freedom in the sense of like working when you wanted, not working, but like working when you wanted, how hard you wanted for the results you wanted, like you said earlier. And it's been one of those things where I took out the hustle mentality and I was able to look at things of like, does this feel good? Does this feel aligned? And I've never been somebody, if you ask anything about me, I'm never someone who's scared to try something. I will put myself out there. I will try the thing. I will fall on my face. I will ask for help. And that was the biggest takeaway I had after the in-person that we had the very first time we met in person for that mastermind was every single person, there's about 50 of us in that group, stood up front. And the number one thing they had struggled the most with was asking for help. And I remember thinking, I struggle with that too, but really more so, I'm always waiting for that clarity and the certainty. I need to know what I need help with before I ask for the help because I don't want to bother anybody. I don't want to, and so that quote really looks like, we are all so different. So being unapologetic about asking for help, about owning the fact that you don't know something will get you further in life than pretending that you do.
Right. Right. And what I love that because if you ask yourself, what do you want out of life? Really, the more important question just becomes, who do you need to become? Right. And I truthfully believe our purpose that God has for us is to become our most authentic self, right? But when it comes to that path to the most authentic self, it's a partnership, right? You have to play your part, which is taking one step at a time, right? Doing the things that you feel called to do. And most times, like you said, we find that our success is unique and our path to success is unique because all the answers that we're looking for are not external, they're internal. Right. There's actually this incredible study, I forget, is it by Harvard, but it said that people's happiness is only dictated by 10% of external circumstances. 90% of your happiness is within. So all the answers are within. And so not to say that you can't listen to incredible guests like Jess Burgio, who obviously has so much experience in the professional world and in the human space, if you will, and like just connecting with humans too. That's one thing I wrote down earlier. I was like, she connects with humans and she solves problems, right? So in my mind, you ain't no accidental entrepreneur. Like that's the equation to really do that. And so you're just someone that's incredible to have in your corner. So where can people find and connect with you, Jess?
No, thank you. I appreciate that. I have my podcast called Unscripted. As long as you type in Unscripted in my name, you'll find it, or you can just go to Instagram. I'd love to chat over there. Send me a voice note if you had any takeaways from today. It's just at Jessica Burgio. And then, there's the podcast page too, where you can go watch all past episodes and check out the guests that we've had on the show. But it's been a few different iterations of, stepping into this new space. And I think you'll find something for yourself if you go and check out, again, the 309 episodes. There's a lot there. So if you want to feel good about starting your podcast, you go listen to some of those early episodes where you're like, oh my God, she's terrible. I can do this too.
I love that because you can help people with so many things. And I think just like your personal brand, if you will, you're a really cool person who cares about our health, cares about our people, and is just good at business, right? And wants to see other people rise. So it's like, just to be able to follow somebody like you, have you in, my corner, I'm truthfully blessed. So thank you for coming on the episode today. I really appreciate it.
Thanks, friend.
No problem at all. Well, everyone, thank you again for listening to another episode of the Holistic Hustle podcast. I hope you enjoyed. Download, subscribe, and as always, if Jess's message reminded you of somebody, please share this episode with them, and we'll see you in the next episode.